Hello everyone, this is Venom, and today we are finally here. We have got the overview of the Prismatic Titan subclass. Now, I do want to go over one thing real quick. I recently made a video about the Titan kit in general, not just the Prismatic subclass, but Titans in general. And I came out and I said that I felt that the Titan kit was a solid kit. However, I don't think that Bungie's really put out content that can really make use of what the Titan can do. Now, the Titan, of course, is a defensive melee monster. However, I was getting a lot of comments in that video basically saying that, and these are the more positive comments, or the more better feedback comments, is that everything a Titan can do, a Warlock and a Hunter can do better. Now, on some things I agree. For example, melee. A Hunter can definitely do better melee than a Titan. Granted, it is a very niche build, however, it can do some crazy melee in the millions. Now, it is a very niche build. The Titan, I think, is still a good melee class, and I think it's got some great melee builds. But other things like the defensive setups, unfortunately, I'm going to say the Titan definitely has that hands down. Now, we do have the Warlock. It's got a few good defensive builds. However, Titan, hands down, without question, has the best defensive builds. Stronghold by itself, just a singular exotic, can basically withstand any damage in the game, including on Grandmaster, and that's just with a single sword ammo that you don't even use. It is amazing. It's got some great defensive abilities, it's got some great defensive aspects, and it is overlooked a lot in raids. Now, I want to make something really clear. I understand that when it comes to raids, Titans do lag behind, and that Warlocks and Hunters can do more damage, and they can do better support, specifically the Warlock as far as support and healing. The Titan can do that too, however, it's going to be lagging behind a bit. Can you do good raids with a Titan? Yes, you can. However, it's going to come down to, and I hate to say this, a bit of a skill issue. And it's not that necessarily that you have to be really good to use Titans in a raid. I'm going to say that it's just so much easier to use Warlocks and Hunters. So I will admit that right off the bat. If you're using a Titan, it does have a place in a raid. I mean, you can do some really good defensive, put up some really good defensive walls. So you can keep your team's overshields going up for a while. And with Banner Shield, you can actually increase your teammates' DPS, even if you're taking yourself out of it. So there are good pros and cons for using a Titan in raids. However, I still am of the opinion that it's only raids that Titans really fall behind. At PvP, yes, but I don't talk about PvP. But as far as raids, yes, Titan definitely falls behind. Now, in Grandmasters, I say Titans are the king. I'll say they are top tier. They've got some amazing builds. They've got amazing crowd control builds and amazing damage builds. And damage builds aren't typically something you use for Grandmasters. You typically want utility or you want crowd control builds. Titans have some crazy arc builds. Granted, they've been slightly nerfed over the years, but they've still got some pretty good damage builds for Grandmasters. So I will admit that as far as a jack of all trades kit, the Titan is probably behind the Hunter and the Warlock. The Titan will definitely lag behind as far as super damage in any raid that requires you to do damage to a boss from far away. However, anything that needs defense or anything as far as a Grandmaster, I'm still going to go ahead and say that the Titan probably gets a few extra points over the Hunter and the Warlock. However, people don't typically care about that, especially right now. They care about the raids, and I'm not saying that it's just a raid fault either, by the way. I fully understand that people want a little bit more out of the Titan besides just the defense or the melee, or they would like things like their melees and defense boosted. I understand that. I understand that people feel like the Titan is falling behind. That was just my own personal opinion, so we're going to go ahead and with the rest of my overview here. And yeah, that's where I stand with that. Like, I heard everybody's feedback. Don't get me wrong. I am somebody who likes to learn from the community. Granted, I've got a very small community, but I do hear you guys, and I am learning from you. So, while I did get some good points for you guys for the Titan, I did get some good observations for you. I do stand by the fact that I think the Titan does have a good kit. However, I do recognize that it does fall behind in some areas. Now, like I said before, it is not a jack-of-all-trades character. It does lag behind in a couple pieces of content, so I fully understand that, and I'm willing to admit it. That being said, it does excellent in other pieces of content too, so I guess it just depends on what it is you're doing. So that being said, I have heard your feedback about the Titan and the Titan kit. Hopefully Bungie does add some things in to kind of round out the Titan issues. Like I said, I really think we need a good range super. There's a couple other things I'd like to tweak. I think some better melee or better defensive when using your melee would really be nice, but I think some of the range attacks are really going to help the Titan if we get any. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the Prismatic Titan overview. There's some things I really like about this one and some things that I really don't like. Overall, I do like the class. I think it's going to be a beast in Grandmasters. However, there are a couple things I want to talk about. Alright, first things first, let's talk about the Transcendent Grenade, the Electrified Snare. This is essentially a shotgun grenade that will then jolt your targets. This is essentially combining two of the best things that Titans have in Grandmasters, and that is arc damage and jolting targets, and the shotgun grenade. The shotgun grenade is an amazing crowd control grenade. All classes have access to it on their base strand subclass, on the, the pure strand subclass, but the Titan gets it both in their Transcendent Grenade and their regular grenade for their Prismatic subclass. So that's going to be really great for Grandmasters. It does bounce. I don't like that it bounces. You get used to it really quickly. It's definitely, I think, in my opinion, probably I'd say the second best grenade, but only behind Warlock for general content. But in Grandmasters, this goes right up to first place, hands down. Like I said, I still think the Hunters is the worst by far. I think in general, at level content, the Warlock's grenade is better. But in Grandmaster content, the Titan grenade is going to be much better, in my opinion. Now, let's go ahead and get to grenades, because, again, I talked about it before, the Titan does get the shotgun grenade for strand, so that's one of the things that's going to make this a beast in Grandmasters, is that shotgun grenade, another way to crowd control your opponents. Now, as far as the grenades we got access to, we got the shotgun, we've got the suppressor. This one is probably going to be better for PvP, but again, you PvP heads, let me know what you think on that one. The thermite grenade, this is an interesting one. I don't like this one at all. I pretty much never use it. I'd be interested to see if anybody uses this for anything. Even for like area control, I probably would use other stuff besides this one. For the arc grenade, we got the pulse grenade. It's not a bad one. It's a pretty good one. And then for the grenade, for the stasis, we got the glacial grenade. So this is one I can actually put up a wall. This is actually a pretty decent grenade. Now, don't get me wrong, the Warlock and the Hunter got grenades that actually fit with exotics that they have. So the Titan basically got what was left over, but the glacial grenade is still a pretty good grenade. You can put down the barrier, block shots, and you can actually smash through it and explode those crystals to do damage. So not a bad grenade. And it does kind of fit in with the Titan. It is a wall of stasis, so it does fit in with that Titan theme. So as far as the grenades go, I am not unhappy. However, I do start to get unhappy when we talk about the melee. Now, as far as the Void goes, I do like Shield Throw. It is my favorite. I do not like Shield Bash. I know Shield Bash has got some really crazy builds, but I have just got it in my head, the Captain America build. I cannot help it. I love Shield Throw. It's not a damage thing. It's not a utility thing. I just happen to really love Shield Throw. That's the only reason I like it. Either one would have been fine, but I do like Shield Throw, and the fact you get an overshield for enemies hit, so that's why one of the reasons that's one of my favorites. Now, again, Shield Bash can do a lot more damage, but I do like the Shield Throw. Now, obviously, for strand, we've only got the one. That's going to be the Frenzied Blade. Now, that means we're going to get 3 charges of this, which is going to work with some other aspects, such as Consecration, but we'll get to that one in a little bit. We're going to skip Solar for now and go right to the last two. The Stasis, obviously, we only got the one, the Shiver Strike. It's a decent melee for Stasis. There are better ones out there, but it's a pretty solid one. And then we've got the Thunderclap. This is probably one of the biggest mean melees there is. It's extremely strong. I do like that it's in here. It is a nice charge melee, and it is beastly to get hit by this thing. Now, I left Solar for last on purpose. I understand that they cannot give Prismatic all the best abilities, but I was very, very, very disappointed when I found out that Titans were not going to have access to their throwing hammer. The throwing hammer is probably the best melee that Titans have. It is probably the most fun to use. Even after the nerf, hammers are the way to go for Titan melee. I am very disappointed that we did not get this for Prismatic Titan. Now, Hammer Strike is an okay melee. Typically, I don't like melees that require you to do other things besides hit the melee button. This one requires you to sprint first. It's not a slide or anything, so it's not hard. But compared to Throwing Hammer, Hammer Strike's just not it. Now, again, I understand I can't put all the best abilities on here, but Hammer Strike, I don't see that having been a problem. I mean, especially since all of the abilities for Titan are especially melee-centric, I definitely think that Throwing Hammer would have been the best bet on here. Now, maybe we wouldn't have had any use to use any of the other melees, except maybe, I say Frenzy Blade, definitely because you get 3 charges. I think Thunderclap definitely would be a contender just because it's so strong and you can charge it up. Now, Shiver Strike's probably going to not see a lot of use, period. Even if we had Throwing or didn't have Throwing Hammer, I don't think Shiver Strike's going to be a huge one. Shield Throw, this is one I'd probably use. So between Shield Throw and Throwing Hammer are probably the 2 I would use. But yeah, I really think Throwing Hammer should have been the melee on here. I hope that they swap that at some point. Now let's talk supers. Now, just a heads up for Titan and Warlock, I've got the same super. I do not have unlocked to both my Titan and my Warlock. It is the second mission for Mithrax where you have to escort those exploding shanks. I just really hate escort missions. I don't care about those supers, so I have not bothered to go out and get them yet, and I really hate those missions, so that's why they are not unlocked. I can go get them right now if I wanted to. I just really don't feel like doing it, and I'm not using them on any builds either, so that's why they are not unlocked. That being said, we've got a decent selection of supers here. That being said, we've got a pretty decent selection of supers. Now, obviously, for Strand and for Stasis, we've only got one, so we don't have a choice on that. Glacier Quake is a pretty good super. Blade Fury is definitely, probably the best Grandmaster super in the game. Now, as far as damage, we've got the Thunder Crash, one of the best damaging supers in the game, if you've got the exotic for it. However, we can probably go ahead and use Starter skills for that instead of using the exotic specifically for Thunder Crash. So Starter for Thunder Crash instead of using Curious to the Fallen Star, combined with something else, and we are good to go. And then we've got Twilight Arsenal. This one is kind of weird for me. It is a new kid on the block. I know people like using it a lot. For me, I don't have much of a practical use for it except to just mess around, or if I want to give myself an overshield when I pick up a Aura Power and I have to set my super to avoid one. That being said, it is fun. I mean, throwing out those 3 axes, doing damage with them, and then picking them up and then either using them as an axe or throwing them, it's cool. But as far as practical purposes for it, as far as like a boss or raid or something, I don't have much use for it outside of AdClair. That being said, it's still a pretty fun super. It is probably the most unique super in the game right now. I do hope to see more supers like this. It would be cool to see like the Warlock pull out a sword you can then, pull out of the ground and use, or the Hunter pull out, some arc staves and let us all use them. That'd be pretty cool. But I don't know if we're getting anything like that in the future, but it is kind of a cool super. Fun as hell, don't get me wrong, but past that clear, I'm probably not going to be using it too much. Alright, next up, let's talk aspects. So we're going to start with the Diamond Lance. Diamond Lance is a pretty good one to help you CC enemies. This is one I'm going to probably use in Grandmasters just because I'll be using a lot of elemental weapons. So we'll be getting those elemental kills a lot quicker and a lot more options so I can actually freeze enemies more. It will be handy in Grandmasters, but past that, really, in regular content, it's okay. I usually forget that the lance is right there. I kill the enemies too quick for the lance to matter, but for Grandmasters or higher end content, this does come in handy because it is a one-shot freeze. Now, next up, we got probably my favorite aspect, and it's a new one, and it is the Unbreakable aspect. This one allows you to consume your grenade and put up a small banner shield. It puts up a small shield in front of you, and then whatever damage it takes, it will reflect back to enemies after you're done with it. Now, I've seen people do some crazy damage to Grandmaster champions using this thing. I've seen some outright kill it, and I've seen some do some pretty crazy damage. So I can't wait to use this one in a Grandmaster. I have not yet. I'm going to be doing more Grandmasters this week. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, so I have not been on Destiny much this week. Now, as far as the build I would use for this, I'm actually trying to farm a Spirit of the Bear and Spirit of the Armamentarium. That will actually make it to where you actually can move around quicker using the shield, and it gives you super energy once you use this, when it's over. And the Armamentarium will give you 2 grenades. So that would be a perfect build for the Unbreakable. That's one I really want to use, so I'm farming for that right now. So that's one I would suggest trying out. If you have not, it is a very fun build to use. Just blocking damage and reflecting it, it's super fun. Next up, we got Consecration, and this is another one that benefits more from being on Prismatic than it does in its own pure subclass, and that is because Consecration runs off of melee charges, and of course we have access to Frenzy Blade on Prismatic, which has 3 melee charges. Now, Consecration basically unleashes a wall of scorching fire at your enemies, and triggering that will actually give you more Diamond Lances. It's going to be an elemental kill set. It will actually work pretty well with your Diamond Lances. So you can actually set them on fire, kill them, drop Diamond Lances, AoE the next group, consecrate them down again. It's actually a pretty decent loop. Now, it's not my favorite, but it is a pretty good loop to use, and it does pretty good AoE damage. And again, it's the one that works perfect because you can use it with the Frenzy Blade. So this is one, it's one of those aspects, kind of like the Warlock, that works better with Prismatic because of the fact that you have access to a multi-hit melee attack. Now, next up, we've got Knockout. I'm going to be completely honest, while Knockout does have some builds to it, I personally do not like it very much. I would rather just proc Devour, and then that would basically take care of anything that Knockout does that I really care about. Now, Knockout would be a lot better if it would proc itself, like it would refresh itself once you got a melee kill. However, it does not, and even since Final Shape came out, it still does not proc itself. So I wish it did, or I wish it would refresh itself. I mean, unfortunately, it does not, so I do not use it very much. Now, it is pretty strong, and it will, amplify you. It will restore your health. And the more powerful enemy, the more health it gets. But again, I would much rather use a Devour build and just reproc that to get more health back and do it with any kill. So I don't particularly like Knockout. And finally, we got the Drenger's Lash. And this is another reason that the Titan is definitely going to be the king of Grandmasters, especially Prismatic, because again, this is another ability that will suspend your enemies. So right now, we've got 3 abilities that suspend your enemies. We've got the Drenger's Lash by using your class item. We've got access to the Shackle Grenade and your grenade slot, and we've got access to the Electrified Snare and your Transcendent Grenade. So 3 different ways right there to suspend enemies on top of your super also be able to suspend enemies. So this bad boy is definitely going to be a beast in Grandmasters. It's essentially got all the regular, or all the skills you would use in a regular Strand Titan, save that you don't have access to the Banner War, unfortunately. However, you use something like Unbreakable instead to block damage even more, making you even more beasty in Grandmasters. So this thing is just going to be a beast. It's going to be a Grandmaster beast, and I cannot wait to start taking people through Grandmasters this season. So yeah, Drenger's Lash, use your class ability to suspend enemies, and you're set. There's no more you got to talk about on that one. Now, what would I add or change in Prismatic if I had a chance to? Well, I talked about it already, but not having Throwing Hammer on Prismatic really hurt, and I'm not even a Titan main. Either swap out that melee or give them Throwing Hammer, Bungie. Let Titans have Throwing Hammer on Prismatic because it is an amazing melee, and I think it really deserves to be on Prismatic. Now, as far as what else I might put on there as far as any of the solar aspects, I'm thinking probably Soul Invictus. Now, this is going to be one that's going to help you heal. I think that'd be really good to have on the Prismatic Titan. That'll let you use something like Lorelai's Helm, and that will let you basically use your class ability to heal as well, too. So, I think Soul Invictus is going to be a good match to have on Prismatic. Now, as for a Strand, hands down, Banner War. Now, I got some backlash last time when I talked about Banner War, and they said Banner War was nerfed. Yes, Banner War was nerfed, and you do have to get more kills to boost it up now, but it's still a very good aspect. So it was not nerfed into the ground like the Wall of Radiance was. Banner War is still an excellent aspect, and I would still rather have this one, or like to have this one added in, than any of the other aspects. And those are going to be the Into the Fray and the Fletcher Storm. I would much rather have Banner War added versus any of those others. As far as the other abilities, I mean, we pretty much got all the best abilities for Grandmasters already. We've got access to the Chakra Grenade, we've got access to the Blade Fury, so all we need now is Banner War, and we're pretty much set. Now, as for stasis, I'm going to go with Titanic Harvest, just to help us get stasis shards. It's going to definitely work with your melee builds as well, too. So yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to it. I don't particularly like aspects where you have to do things like sliding, and yeah, both the other two, you basically have to slide to activate the ability. So this one, Croclasm, improves your slide distance, and sliding into stasis crystals will break them. And then, of course, Howl the Storm, where sliding activates your charge of melee to launch a wave. It's basically Consecration, but in stasis form. So I would much rather have the Titanic Harvest. Now for Arc, this is going to be another one that's going to depend on how they handle it in Prismatic. If they actually give functionality to every grenade the Titan has access to, kind of how I talked about the Warlock, if they give us access to all those grenades and enhance every one you got access to, and I go Touch of Thunder just to enhance whatever grenades that Titan has access to. However, if it only enhances the Arc grenades, then by default we pretty much have to go Juggernaut. So if we enhance all grenades, Touch of Thunder. If not, Juggernaut. Now, as far as the Void, I'm kind of torn between Offensive Bulwark and Bastion. I'm probably going to have to go with Bastion, though, because Offensive Bulwark really works when you've got either a bubble or you've already got Bastion equipped for that overshield. What Bastion does is whenever you use your barricade, it gives you an overshield to your nearby enemies. This is the one I've been using for Rage a lot, and this is pretty much the best way to put on your overshield. This works in tandem with Offensive Bulwark because Offensive Bulwark is triggered when you have an overshield. So unless you got a really good way to practically get that overshield on all the time on Prismatic, which you really don't, then Bastion is going to be your best way to go, and I'd rather have Bastion on there. Now, what's my final overview of the Prismatic Titan? I definitely think the Prismatic Titan needs some additional aspects or some aspects swapped in. I am starting to agree with some people that maybe they lean too far into the melee aspect of it and they didn't lean too far into the defensive aspect, and not just literal physical defense. There are other parts of the Titan that makes it a defensive beast, and not just the actual physical defense of it. For example, having Soul Invictus and Lorelai's Helmet. That's a very, very powerful two-part combo that keeps Titans alive up to raids. I mean, you can go through a raid and damn near not die having that combination on. That's a very good one, and you're not blocking, you're not using any of your defensive abilities. Now, I think we're still lacking a really good range super. That's just an issue with the Titan in general, but I do think that the kit is still pretty fun. Now, note that I said fun, not necessarily effective. Now, it's going to really depend on what it is that you're doing, and this is where the skill issue comes in. This is why I don't want to sound like I'm insulting people, because that's not what I'm trying to do, but it's going to be a lot easier for someone like me to take this through a raid or take it to a grandmaster than it is going to be somebody who doesn't necessarily have these skills I have with gunplay. And again, I'm not really that good. I've done a lot of grandmasters that I just know them like the back of my hand at this point. It's not like I'm super good or anything. I've just got to memorize really well. I've just done raids enough to where I can kind of screw around a bit more, so I can actually use those weird builds. It's like when you see PvP players that are always talking about, hey, this weapon is like the best, most broken weapon in Destiny 2, and you go back and check, and they've said that about literally every weapon, and it turns out it's not the weapon, it's just them. They're really, really good. It's kind of the same thing. I'm good enough that I can use almost any build in any situation, PvE-wise, because I don't PvP, and I think that's a bit of what's going on here, and I think that's a bit of what might be clouding my judgment when it comes to the kit of the Titan. I think that I'm just good enough that I can actually use a Titan kit in most content and be comfortable with it, versus somebody else who may not be used to doing that content over and over and over again, and may only be doing it, the first, second, or third time or so. I think that might be part of the issue here, too. I think I might have too much of the game memorized, or that I do certain activities so much that might be what's doing it for me, too. Or it could be I've just got really good clan members I play with as well, or a combination of all those things. So maybe I've got a bit more wiggle room when it comes to builds, and that might be part of what's kind of clouding my judgment. I will fully admit that. So that being said, I still think the kit is fun, but I will say right here now that I fully recognize and understand that this is not necessarily going to be a kit that's going to help you through a lot of raids. Especially since something that is really important for the Titan for raids, that does help, even though it's not necessarily preferred. Something that is preferred for the Titan for raids is going to be the bubble, and unfortunately the Prismatic Titan does not have that bubble. Instead, it's got the Twilight Arsenal, which again, I understand I had to add it in because of DLC reasons, and it's a new one, but that Ward of Dawn really hurts the Titan for anything raid related. Now again, I think the Prismatic Titan is going to be the absolute best Grandmaster character ever. I think the combination of Unbreakable and Dringer's Lash combined with Shackle Grenade, we'll go ahead and say we can put on Shiver Strike just to freeze enemies as a no shit button. We've got the Electrified Snare, and then if we get the class item I want, which is going to be the Spirit of the Bear and the Spirit of the Armamentarium, that's going to further increase our Unbreakable by giving us super energy from that, and by giving us 2 grenades. I think that combination right there is going to make this thing just unstoppable in a Grandmaster if you know what you're doing. On top of that, having the Thunder Crash on there is going to help with champions too. Thunder Crash, I mentioned earlier, Titans are one of the few classes, and Arc specifically is one of the few builds you can actually do in a Grandmaster, because it was so strong, it was actually one-shotting champions. Now, granted, you needed the Curse of the Falling Star, so maybe combining this with starter skills would do that same thing there, but even if not, you've still got some good CC supers here, mainly Blade Fury. So that right there, I think is going to carry you through a lot of Grandmasters, and I think it's going to be a beast. I'll predict we see a lot of Grandmasters this season that are done by Titans, so that is my overview of the Prismatic Titan. I think it's a very fun class. I think it's going to be my Grandmaster class for the season. However, it does have its shortcomings, and that is the fact that it is going to be a short-range class. It's going to be very, very tanky, very defensive, but we do need to get some kind of range options for raids, or some different support that will actually help us out in raids a little bit more than what we got right now. So that is going to do it for me for today, guys. Thank you for coming by. Please, if you like the video, if you like what we're doing here, please sub to the channel if you love what we're doing, and I will see you all on the next video.